I never expected my phone to ring at 2 in the morning. Never expected that shrill shriek of my niece's voice to cut through the silence. I was half asleep in my living room blanket wrapped around my shoulders, cup of tea growing cold, and when I saw her name flash on my screen, a chill ran through me. Because nothing good comes at this hour. Nothing good comes at 2. AMI answered softly. "Hello, dear." I whispered, my voice hoarse from sleep, and she didn't even pause. She just started sobbing. I could barely understand the words she was trying to say. The gasping between tears was almost unbearable, she whispered. "Don't tell Mom. I don't want her to know," and I froze because my stomach turned over. Something was very, very wrong. My heart started pounding. I said, "Slow down. Tell me what's happening." And she started telling me. And I swear, I felt my chest collapse, piece by piece. It started with her voice shaking. "I don't know what to do," she said. "I don't know where else to go. I'm so scared. Please don't tell anyone." I promise she barely got that out before bursting into uncontrollable sobs, and I felt helpless. Miles away, unable to reach through the phone and hold her tight. I wanted to tell her it's okay, that everything would be all right, but I didn't. I waited. I let her speak because sometimes what someone needs most is just to be heard. And she kept saying, "I don't want Mom to find out. I don't want her to be mad at me. Don't tell Mom. Don't tell Mom." And I could hear the little hitch in her breath that told me she was shaking. Maybe even curled up on her bed, clutching her pillow like it was the only thing keeping her from floating away. And then she finally said it. "I don't even know if I can say it," she whispered, and my stomach twisted even tighter. "Please don't be mad at me, please promise." And I promised I wouldn't be mad. That's not what she needed. She needed someone calm, someone safe, and I said, "I promise. I won't be mad. I just need you to tell me what happened." And the words tumbled out in broken pieces between sobs and gasps. She told me she'd done something she never thought she would do, and I could hear the shame in her voice, the fear, the weight of guilt that seemed to press down on her chest heavier than the world itself. I stayed on the line with her, just listening, coaxing gently through the pauses. She told me how it all started. The teasing at school, the whispered secrets that turned into rumors, and then the bullying that escalated at home. She didn't say names. She didn't want to cause trouble. She just said they were being mean to her, and I could hear the trembling in her voice when she said they pushed her so far that she didn't know what else to do. I could hear her swallow hard even through the phone, like she was trying to swallow the whole world, and I thought, oh my God, my sweet little girl. "What have you been carrying all this time?" she said. She ran to the bathroom at school. She said she just wanted to be alone. She said she didn't want anyone to see her cry. And that's when it happened. She said she grabbed something from her backpack, something she wasn't supposed to. And she whispered, "I made a mistake, a huge mistake," and I felt my chest tighten because I knew she meant it. The words in her trembling voice carried the weight of panic and regret and fear of being discovered. I could almost picture her small hands shaking as she held it, and my heart ached because I knew there was no going back for that moment once it happened. Once the choice was made, it changed everything. I kept my voice steady. I told her it's okay. "It's okay. We can figure this out together." She kept saying, No, I can't. I can't let Mom find out. I can't. And I said, "Listen, I'm not going to tell her yet. I just need to know what happened. I just need to understand." And she whispered the words so low I barely heard them. "I don't know if I should say it," and I said slowly, "You have to say it. You have to tell me so I can help you." She took a deep, shaky breath, and then she said it. "I broke it. I broke something at home." She started crying even harder, and my stomach sank. I thought, oh no, my poor baby, and I kept repeating it. It's okay, we will fix this." I just need to know how bad it is. She told me what she had done. She had taken something precious from her mom, something that she couldn't replace. She hadn't meant to. She said she was angry. She was frustrated and she just wanted to feel something else. For a moment, she didn't think she'd actually break it, and now she had, and she didn't know what to do. She said she was terrified. Her mom would be disappointed, or angry, or worse. She said, I don't know if I can ever tell her. And I felt tears prick my eyes because I knew exactly how heavy that guilt felt, how impossible it seemed to carry. And I wanted to take the burden from her shoulders, even if just for a little while. I asked her why she hadn't called me sooner, and she said she was ashamed. She didn't want anyone to find out. She thought she could fix it herself. And when she said it, I realized how scared she must have been all alone at night, thinking about the consequences. And I said, it's okay. It's okay. You're not alone anymore. I'm here now. I'm not going anywhere. I'm not going to tell anyone yet. I just need to know what happened, so we can figure out what to do together. We talked through it step by step. She told me where it happened, how it happened. She even told me what she was thinking at the time, the fear, the frustration, the anger, all of it. And I didn't judge her. I just listened. I whispered reassurances. I told her mistakes happen. Everyone makes them, even adults. And I could hear her breathing start to slow a little. Just a little, like the tension was lifting from her chest because she knew someone new and someone wasn't going to be mad. Someone wasn't going to punish her. She was safe on the phone with me. Then she said, I don't know if I can sleep. I can't stop thinking about what I did. And I said, that's okay. We'll stay on the line until you calm down. We'll breathe together. She said. She was scared. She said, what if Mom finds out? And I said, listen, we're going to make a plan. We're going to fix this and you're not going to be alone in it. She asked me, what if Mom's really mad? And I said, then we deal with it together. We figure out the words. We figure out how to make it right. You don't have to do it alone. And I could hear a little relief in her voice, a tiny little crack of hope that maybe this wasn't the end of the world. She kept crying quietly between sentences. I could hear the sniffles, the hiccups, and I whispered, it's okay to cry. It's okay to be scared. It doesn't mean you're a bad person. It means you're human. And she said, I just feel so awful. And I said, I know it's awful right now, but awful doesn't last forever. We'll get through this together. We will fix this together. And I could almost picture her small body curled up on her bed, shaking and feeling like the whole world had turned against her. And I wanted to be there, to wrap her in my arms and hold her and tell her it's going to be okay. Hours passed. Slowly, we talked through every detail. I calmed her as best I could through the phone. We made a plan about how to address it the next day, how to take responsibility, without fear, and I kept reassuring her. It's okay. It's okay. Mistakes happen. And she started breathing a little steadier, almost like a storm had passed just enough to see the light through the clouds. She said, thank you. She said, I don't know what I would have done without you, and I whispered, you'll never be alone. I'll always be here. By the time the first light of morning started creeping through the curtains, I could tell she was calmer. Her sobs had quieted to soft sniffles. She whispered, I think I can sleep now, and I said, good rest. Now we'll talk tomorrow, and she said, I love you, and I whispered, I love you too, and that was it. The line went silent, and I sat there holding my tea, long forgotten, thinking about how fragile. She felt how heavy the guilt had been on her young shoulders, and how much she needed someone to just listen to her to let her know she wasn't alone, and I promised myself I would be there for her no matter what. The next morning, I couldn't stop thinking about her. I kept replaying her voice in my head, the little trembles, the quiet sobs, the way she whispered, don't tell Mom, over and over. I felt a weight in my chest all through breakfast. I kept my phone close every time it buzzed. My heart leapt, hoping it was her, checking in, making sure I was still there and I wasn't wrong. She texted a little after sunrise, just a simple, "Hey," with a tiny crying emoji. And I typed back as fast as I could, "Hey, you okay? Did you sleep at all?" And she replied slowly, "Yeah, a little. But I'm still scared." And I said, I know it's okay. We'll handle it today together. Just you and me." I wanted to tell her to breathe, but she needed to move too. She needed to face what she'd done. I reminded her we had a plan. We would go step by step. She said she didn't want Mom to be mad or disappointed, and I told her, no one is mad. Yet we just need honesty. And she said, I'm scared. I said, I know. But remember how we talked last night. Mistakes don't make you a bad person. It just makes you human. And I could hear the little pause as she read it over and over, like she was trying to convince herself that maybe I was right. By mid-morning, she sent a picture of the broken item. Something she had shattered. The look on her face in the photo was one of pure guilt, eyes wide and frightened like a little bird trapped in a cage. And I felt a pang in my heart because I knew exactly how it felt to carry something too heavy for your shoulders to hold, and I told her, don't worry, we'll fix this step by step, you're not alone. And she replied, thanks, and added a tiny heart emoji. I could feel the tension in her text lines loosen just a little. I told her we needed to think about what to say. When her mom found out, she typed back, I don't know if I can say it. I said, listen, you just have to tell the truth. You already admitted it to me. And that's a start. That's the hardest part. She typed back, I'm shaking, and I said, I know, but I'll be right here with you. Every word, every second, you won't be alone. And she sent a little thumbs up emoji, and I felt a tiny spark of hope. Maybe she could do this. Maybe we could get through it together. Around noon, she called me again. I could hear her soft voice shaking, but steadier than last night. I whispered, hi, baby, how are you? And she said, I don't know. I think Mom knows. I said, okay, don't panic. We'll go slowly. What happened? And she explained. The conversation with her mom started with a question about why she seemed quiet yesterday, and she froze. She didn't know what to say. She didn't want to lie. She didn't want to make anything worse. And I could feel the anxiety in her words, even through the phone, like it was wrapping around my chest too, and I whispered, it's okay, take a breath. We can do this. We can make it right together, she said. She finally blurted it out. I broke it. I didn't mean to. I was just frustrated, and I felt my stomach twist because I remembered her trembling voice, and I whispered, good job, baby. You did it. You said the truth. That's the hardest part. And she said Mom was quiet at first, and I said, that's okay. It's normal. She's processing. What happened? She didn't yell or scream, did she? And she said no. She just looked sad, and I told her that's okay. Sadness is better than anger, because now we can fix it together. She asked, what if Mom is disappointed? I said, everyone makes mistakes. She's going to understand you tried your best to be honest. Through the rest of the day, we texted back and forth. She sent me updates, little confessions like, I'm helping clean up a little bit. And I said, good job. That's exactly right. Don't hide, just take care of it. And she sent a photo of herself holding some pieces of the broken item, looking like she was trying to glue it back together. And I told her, you're doing amazing. It's okay if it doesn't go perfectly. What matters is that you're trying. And she sent a tiny smiley emoji, and I could almost hear her sigh through it, relief spilling out little by little. By evening, I called her, and she picked up almost immediately, her voice soft and quieter than usual. I whispered, hi, sweetie, she said. Hi, and I said, how are you holding up? And she said, tired. I know I was too. I said, I know it's been a long day, but you did so good. And she said, Mom isn't mad really, she's just disappointed. And I said, see, that's okay. We can fix disappointment much easier than anger. And she whispered, "Yeah, I guess." And I said, "I'm proud of you for being honest, for facing it, for not running away." I could hear her small intake of breath, and I knew she was absorbing it, letting it sink in, letting herself breathe a little. Then she said something I wasn't expecting. She whispered, "I feel like everyone would be mad if they knew what I did." And I said, "I know it feels that way, but people care about you. They understand that you're human." And I could hear the relief in her voice, the little crack in her defenses that told me she was starting to trust herself again. She said, "I don't know how to fix it." I said, "We already started, baby. We already fixed it a little every time. You take a step. We fix a little more." We spent hours just talking that night about how to prevent it from happening again, how to handle frustration, how to express feelings without breaking things, how to be honest and brave even when it's scary. And she listened. She really listened. I could hear the little nods even through the phone, and I said, "That's right. Little one, that's exactly right. We'll make it better together." And she whispered, "Okay, I think I can sleep tonight." I said, "That's what I wanted to hear. Close your eyes now. Let your body rest." And she whispered, "Love you." And I whispered, "Love you too." Then came the moment I didn't see coming. She asked quietly through the phone. Something that made my heart stop for a second. She whispered, "Do you think I'm a bad person?" And I took a deep breath and said, "Absolutely not. Mistakes don't define you. You are wonderful. You are brave. You are honest. And you are loved." And she stayed silent for a moment and then whispered, "Thank you." And I knew that tiny moment that trust had formed a bond stronger than fear. The next few days were a dance of small steps. She would update me about little chores she did to help fix things. She would send photos of progress she made, and I always responded with encouragement. Every little bit mattered. I told her that every tiny step forward was a victory, and I could hear the change in her tone, little by little. The trembling faded from her voice. The sobs became sniffles. The hesitation became confidence, and I thought, maybe this is how healing works. Tiny pieces at a time. One afternoon, she sent a text that made me smile. It said, "I helped Mom fix the vase together," and I typed back, "You did. That's amazing, you did it together." And she said, "Yeah?" She smiled at me while we glued it, and I said, "See. Little one, honesty and effort make everything better." She replied, "I know." And I could hear the pride in her words. And it was so subtle, so quiet, but it was there a spark of courage, a spark of self-respect that I felt, and I knew she was starting to heal from the fear and guilt that had gripped her so tightly. Then came the night she whispered something almost too quietly for me to hear. "I'm scared of making mistakes again." And I said, I know we all are, but that's why we have each other." And she said, "Yeah, I guess." And I said, "Every mistake is a lesson. Every time we fix things, we grow stronger." And she whispered, "Okay, I understand." And I knew that little night, we built more than trust. We built resilience. We built confidence. We built love for herself that she had almost lost. By the end of part 2, I could see the change in her. She wasn't just a scared little girl anymore. She was brave. She was learning. She was growing. She still had moments of fear, but they didn't consume her like before. And I knew she would stumble again. She would face frustrations again. But she had me. She had the truth. She had honesty. And she had courage. And that was enough to carry her through. Stories. Her heart holds. The days that followed were quiet but heavy. I could feel the tension in her messages, the small pauses between words, the little hesitations that told me she was still afraid, still worried that one wrong step would make everything fall apart. I kept reminding her, "You're doing amazing, every single day matters." And she would type back, "Thanks," or "Okay," or a little heart emoji. And I knew she was listening, really listening, and slowly learning that mistakes didn't have to be the end of the world. One afternoon, I got a call from her while I was at work. She whispered, "Hi." I said, "Hi." "Baby, how's it going?" And she said, "Mom is asking more questions about yesterday." I could hear the nervous gulp through the phone, and I whispered, "Breathe. It's okay, we can handle this together." And she said, "I don't know what to say." I said, "You just say the truth like last time and we'll go step by step." She whispered, "Okay." And I could almost see her small shoulders shrugging, as if carrying the weight of the world. And I whispered, "You're stronger than you think, little one. We'll face it together." She told me the conversation started slowly. Her mom asking gentle questions about school, about friends. And then it shifted a little. She said, "Mom noticed something about the broken vase and was quiet for a long time," and I whispered, "Okay, that's normal. Sometimes grown-ups need a moment to process." She whispered, "I think she's upset," and I said, "It's okay. We all get upset. It doesn't mean she doesn't love you. It just means she cares, and she needs to understand what happened." I could hear her small sigh through the phone, and I said, "You're okay. Just keep talking. You're safe with me." By evening, she sent me a photo of her sitting at the kitchen table, mom beside her, both hands working carefully to glue the pieces together. She whispered, "Look, I'm trying to fix it." And I said, "That's perfect. That's exactly right. Take it slowly, every piece matters." And she typed back. Mom smiled at me a little, and I said, "See, she understands your effort. She sees you're trying," and she whispered, "Yeah, I think she does." And I could almost hear the tiny spark of pride in her words growing stronger. Later that night, she called again, her voice softer than usual. I said, "Hi, baby. How's it going?" And she said, "I think Mom is worried about me." I said, "Why?" And she whispered, "I don't know. I just feel like she thinks I might do something else." I said, "Listen, she's not judging you. She's scared for you." And she whispered, "Maybe. But I don't want to disappoint her." I said, "Baby, you've already done the hardest part. You told the truth. You're fixing it. You're learning. That's all anyone can ask." And she whispered, "Okay, I'll try." And I could hear the little tremble in her voice that told me she was still scared, but willing to trust me. A few days later, she sent me a text that made my heart skip. She whispered, "Mom asked me to tell you everything." I said, "What, everything?" And she said, "Yeah." She said she wants me to tell you about how I feel about school and friends and home, and I could hear the hesitation in her words. I said, "Okay, that's good, baby, that's really good." She whispered, "But I'm scared." I said, I know it's okay to be scared, but you'll be honest and I'll be here." And she said, "Okay." And I could feel the courage slowly building in her voice, little by little. That night she called and told me everything, the teasing, the rumors, the fights at school, the times she wanted to run away. She whispered, "I felt so alone." And I said, "I know, baby. I know." And I held the line open, letting her pour it out, letting her know she wasn't alone anymore. She whispered, "Thanks." And I said, "Anytime, always." And she whispered, "I don't want to hide anymore." And I said, "That's right. Honesty is freedom." And I could hear the tiniest laugh in her words, and my heart lifted a little. Then came the night she whispered something that made me hold my breath. She said, "I think I might be in trouble at school." I said what happened, and she whispered, "I don't want to say it." I said, "Baby, it's okay. We'll face it together." She said, "They found out about what happened yesterday at home." And I whispered, "Oh, I see." I said, "It's okay. Don't panic. We'll make a plan." And she whispered, "But what if they tell Mom she'll be mad?" I said, "She already knows, honey. We just need to focus on fixing it and being honest." And she whispered, "Okay." And I could feel her shaking even through the phone. We stayed on the line for hours that night, talking through every possible scenario. What if this happens? What if that happens? How do we handle it? How do we speak? How do we stay calm? How do we show effort? And I whispered, every time it's okay, we'll figure it out step by step. And she whispered, okay, I'll try. And I could hear the determination in her voice, fighting the fear that had gripped her for so long. I thought, maybe this is the turning point. Maybe she's starting to believe she can survive mistakes without being crushed. The next day, she texted little updates from school. The teacher asked questions about her homework. She whispered I tried to answer honestly, and I said, that's perfect, baby. Exactly what I wanted you to do. Every answer matters. And she sent back a tiny smile emoji, and I felt the tension lift a little bit from both of us. She whispered, thanks for helping me. I said, always. Baby, I'm always here. And she whispered, love you. And I said, love you too. And I knew that tiny string of connection was keeping her anchored in courage. By the end of the week, she sent me a photo of her at school, helping another student clean up a spill. She whispered, I didn't want anyone else to feel like I did. And I said, that's amazing, baby. That's exactly right. Helping others shows strength. And she whispered, I think Mom would be proud, and I said she already is. And I could feel her confidence growing, little by little, like a flower stretching toward the sun after a long winter. Then came the weekend, she whispered. I have to talk to Mom about something else. I said, okay, baby, what is it? And she whispered, I made another mistake, and I felt my chest tighten. Because even though we were making progress, she was still scared, still carrying guilt. I said, it's okay, baby. Tell me. And she whispered, I broke the cookie jar and I felt a tiny laugh escape me because of the smallness of it. But I didn't want to minimize her fear. I said, that's okay, baby. It happens, let's figure it out together. And she whispered, okay, I'll tell her. And I said, exactly right. Honesty first. She told me she approached her mom, slowly explained what happened, and I whispered, good job, baby, that's perfect. And she said, Mom smiled and said, accidents happen. And I said, see, honey, every time you're honest, the world softens. And she whispered, yeah, I guess. And I said, every single time, it gets easier. Every single time you're braver. And I could hear the tiniest glimmer of hope in her words. By the end of part 3, I could feel the shift in her. She wasn't the same scared, trembling little girl who called me at 2 a.m. She was growing into someone who could face mistakes with honesty and courage, who could trust someone enough to lean on them, and who was starting to trust herself. I knew this was just the beginning of her journey. Mistakes would come again. Fears would come again. But she had the tools she needed now. She had me, she had honesty, she had courage, and she had love, and that was enough for now to carry her forward. Stories. Her heart. Holds It was a Sunday afternoon when things started to feel heavier again. I could sense it in her texts, the little pauses, the hesitations, the almost invisible sighs. She sent a message that said, I don't know what to do. And I immediately replied, I'm here, baby. Tell me what's happening. And she whispered, it's about my friend at school. I don't want to get anyone in trouble. And I said, baby, it's okay. Just tell me everything. And she whispered, I think I did something bad I didn't mean to. And I could hear the fear in her voice, the same fear from that night she called me at 2 a.m. And I felt my chest tighten. She started telling me about a secret she'd kept for days, about something that happened in the playground during recess, and I could hear how much she was carrying on her young shoulders. She whispered, I tried to tell my teacher, but I couldn't. I didn't know how. And I said, it's okay. Baby, you're safe with me now. Just tell me what happened. And she whispered, we were playing and someone got hurt and I didn't know what to do. And I froze and I said, it's okay. Baby, accidents happen. That doesn't make you bad. It just means you need help. And she whispered, I just wanted to run away. And I said, baby, running away doesn't solve anything, but talking does. And you're talking to me now. And she whispered, yeah, but I'm scared. I stayed on the line with her for hours, letting her tell me every detail, every moment. every thought and emotion, and I whispered gentle reassurances over and over. "You're not alone, baby. I'm right here. I'll help you through this." And she would take little pauses and then whisper, "Okay, I'll tell you everything." And I could hear her small breath shaking as she spoke, and I felt the weight of her fear as if it were pressing on my chest too. That night she whispered, "I don't know if Mom will understand." And I said, "Baby, she already does. She just needs the truth." And I said, "Remember what happened with the vase and the cookie jar?" Honesty made everything lighter, and she whispered, "Yeah, I remember." And I said, "This is the same baby, you just need to tell her." And I could hear the little catch in her throat, the hesitation that told me she was terrified, but willing to try. We made a plan like we always did. Step by step, how to approach her mom, how to explain what happened, how to apologize, how to make it right. And I could hear her breathing slowly, calm herself as she repeated the plan out loud, whispered, "That's perfect, baby. You're doing exactly what you need to do." And she whispered, "Okay, I'll try tomorrow." And I said, "That's right. Just try." And I could hear a tiny note of courage creeping into her words. The next morning she sent me a photo of herself walking to her mom. I could see the small tilt of her shoulders, the careful grip on her backpack strap, the slow steps, and I whispered, "Baby, you're so brave, I'm proud of you." And she whispered, "Thanks, I'm scared." And I said, "I know, baby, but you can do it." And she whispered, "Okay." And I felt that tiny spark of trust in herself that we had been building all these weeks, glimmering in her posture. And I knew she could face it. She told me later that her mom noticed her quiet steps and asked gently what was wrong, and she whispered, "I don't know how to say it." And I said, "Baby, just start with the truth." And she whispered, "Okay." And I could hear the shaky breaths through the phone as she opened her mouth and told her mom everything about what had happened on the playground. Every detail, every mistake, every thought. And I whispered, "Good job, baby. You did it exactly right." Every word mattered. Her mom's response was calm but firm. She said she understood, but that there were consequences that she needed to think about what to do next. And I whispered, "That's okay, baby. That's normal." And she whispered, "Yeah, I guess." And I said, "Baby, you told the truth. That's the hardest part done." And she whispered, "Yeah, I guess it is." And I could hear the weight lifting from her chest a little, because she knew she had faced the fear and survived. Over the next few days, we worked together again. Little by little, she would text me updates about how she approached her teacher, how she apologized, how she tried to help her friend recover, and I would respond with encouragement every time, "Baby, that's perfect, you're doing amazing," and she would reply, "Thanks," or a tiny smile emoji. And I could see the confidence in her, words growing even if her steps were still small. Then came the night she whispered something that made my heart ache. She said, "I think my friend hates me now." And I said, "Baby, we can't control how other people feel. We can only control how we act." And I whispered gently, "The truth. You did your best. You apologized. You tried to fix it. And that's all anyone can ask." And she whispered, "Yeah, but I feel awful." And I said, "Baby, feeling bad doesn't make you bad. It means you care. It means you're human." And she whispered, "Okay, I'll try to remember that." And I could hear the little tremble in her voice slowly fade. I stayed on the line with her that night until she felt calm, until she whispered, "I think I can sleep now." And I said, "That's what I wanted to hear. Baby, close your eyes and rest." And she whispered, "Love you." And I said, "Love you too." And I could hear the relief in her tone, like the storm inside her heart had settled just a little. The following week, she sent me a text that made my chest ache with pride. She whispered, "I helped my friend today. I gave her water. I helped her get a bandage." And I said, "Baby, that's incredible. Exactly what I wanted you to do." And she whispered, "Thanks for teaching me how to fix things even when they're scary." And I said, "Baby, you did it yourself. I just helped you see you could." And she whispered, "Yeah, I guess I did." And I could hear the quiet confidence growing in her words. Then came the moment I had been waiting for. She whispered, "Mom said she's proud of me," and I whispered, "Baby, that's wonderful. That's exactly what you needed to hear." And she whispered, "Yeah." And I said, "Baby, remember every time you're honest, every time you try to fix things, every time you face your fears, you're building strength and courage." And she whispered, "I feel a little stronger." And I could feel the weight of fear and guilt lifting from her small shoulders just a little. By the end of part 4, I could see the transformation even more. Clearly, she wasn't just learning how to fix mistakes. She was learning how to face fear, how to take responsibility, how to trust herself and others. She was still small and fragile in many ways, but she had a backbone now, a spark of courage that would carry her through the tough moments ahead. And I knew that this was only the beginning of her journey, that mistakes would come again, fears would come again, but she now had the tools to face them and survive. Stories. Her heart holds it was midweek when the first real test came. I could feel it in her texts, the little trembles in her words. She whispered, "I think I messed up again," and my chest tightened immediately. I typed back slowly, "Baby, tell me what happened?" And she whispered, "I didn't mean to hurt anyone, but I yelled and said things I shouldn't have." And I felt my stomach twist the same way I had that first night when she called me at 2 a.m. And I whispered, "It's okay, baby, we'll fix it together like we always do." And she typed back, "Okay, I'll try." She told me the story, slowly, every word trembling through the phone. She whispered, "My friend said something mean," and I snapped. And I said, "Baby, we all get angry. Sometimes it doesn't make you a bad person." And she whispered, "But I feel awful." I yelled at her and she almost cried. I said, "Baby, yelling doesn't define you. Your actions define you and your next step matters." And she whispered, "Okay, I'll try to fix it." And I could hear the hesitation in her words, but also the tiny spark of willingness. We worked through it together step by step, how to apologize, how to say the truth, how to make amends without making things worse, how to show you care even when you're scared. And I whispered over and over, "Baby, it's okay. Take your time, we'll fix this." And she whispered, "Thank you. I couldn't do this without you." And I said, "Baby, you're doing it all yourself. I'm just guiding you." And she whispered, "Okay." And I could hear her breathing steady a little, the first sign that the fear was loosening its grip. That afternoon, she sent me a photo of her friend with a small smile and her own expression, nervous but hopeful. I whispered, "Baby, look at that progress. Every little effort matters." And she whispered, "Yeah, I think she's not mad anymore." And I said, "Exactly, baby. That's what honesty and effort do, they fix what seems broken." And she whispered, "Okay, I'll remember that." And I could hear the confidence building slowly in her voice. By Friday, she called me while I was at work, her voice soft but steadier than usual. I whispered, "Hi, baby. How's it going?" And she said, "I think Mom noticed I've been more responsible." And I said, "Baby, that's wonderful. That's exactly right." And she whispered, "Yeah, I cleaned my room, I helped with laundry," and I said, "See, baby, that's exactly what makes a difference. Little steps add up." And she whispered, "Yeah, I feel better when I do it." And I could hear the pride in her, words small but real. Then came the weekend. She whispered something new. "I think my friend is mad again." And I said, "Baby, we can't control other people's feelings. We can only control our actions." And she whispered, "Yeah, but I feel like it's my fault." And I said, "Baby, you did your best, you apologized, you tried to fix it, that's all anyone can ask." And she whispered, "Okay, I'll try to talk to her again." And I said, "Baby, that's exactly right. Honesty and effort together. Fix things." And she whispered, "Thanks. I don't know what I would do without you." And I said, "Baby, you're stronger than you think. You just need to see it." That night she called crying softly. I whispered, "Baby, what's wrong?" And she said, "I yelled at my little cousin, and now she won't talk to me." I felt my chest tighten because I knew she was carrying guilt like a heavy blanket, and I whispered, "It's okay, baby. Everyone makes mistakes. It's how we fix them that matters." And she whispered, "But I don't know if I can fix it." And I said, "Baby, we'll do it together. Every step I'll guide you." And she whispered, "Okay." And I could hear the trembling in her voice, slowly giving way to determination. We talked for hours making a plan how to apologize, how to show. She cared how to rebuild trust, and I whispered, "Baby, it's okay. Take it slow. We'll fix it together." And she whispered, "Okay." And by the end of the call, she whispered, "I think I can sleep now." And I said, "That's what I wanted. Baby, rest now." And she whispered, "Love you." And I said, "Love you too." And I knew she was beginning to trust herself again. Over the next few days, she sent me little updates, every effort she made, every small victory she achieved, and I would respond with encouragement. "Baby, that's amazing. Every little step matters." And she would reply tiny emojis or just, "Okay." And I could hear the confidence in her words growing steadily. She whispered, "I think Mom noticed I'm trying harder." And I said, "Baby, that's wonderful. That's exactly what she needs to see." And she whispered, "Yeah, I think she is proud." And I could feel the tension loosening from her small shoulders. Then came the moment that shook me. She whispered, "I think my friend told Mom about the fight at school." And I froze for a second, my chest tightening, but I whispered calmly, "Baby, it's okay. We'll face it together." "What happened?" And she whispered, "She said everything, but I don't know if Mom believes me." And I said, "Baby, honesty is stronger than anything. Fear can create. We'll fix this one step at a time." And she whispered, "Okay." And I could hear the shakiness in her voice slowly steadier. The next day, she sent me a photo of herself sitting beside her mom, homework on the table, careful expression on her face. And I whispered, "Baby, that's exactly right. Being present, being honest. That's how we fix things." And she whispered, "Yeah, I hope she understands." And I said, "She will, baby. It takes time, patience, honesty, and effort together." And she whispered, "Okay, I'll try to remember that." And I could hear her courage building slowly but surely. By the end of part 5, I could see it clearly. She was changing. Mistakes didn't terrify her anymore. She still felt guilt. She still felt fear, but she was learning how to face it, how to fix it, how to trust herself and others. She was stronger, braver, more honest, and more resilient. And I knew that mistakes would come again. Challenges would come again. But she now had the tools to face them head on and survive. And I knew that this was the foundation of a courage she could carry forever. Stories. Her heart holds it was late one night when my phone buzzed, and I saw her name flash across the screen. I felt a small jolt in my chest because late-night calls usually meant something heavy. And I answered softly, "Hello, baby." And she whispered, "Hi, I don't know what to do." And I felt the familiar tightening in my stomach, and I said, "Baby, tell me what's happening." And she whispered, "It's about my friend from school again." And I said, "Okay, baby, take a deep breath. We'll figure this out together." She started telling me the story slowly, each word trembling through the phone. "I don't know if she likes me anymore," she whispered, and I felt my heart ache because I knew how heavy guilt and fear could feel on her young shoulders. I said, "Baby, listen, you can't control other people's feelings, but you can control yours and your actions." And she whispered, "Yeah, but I yelled at her yesterday, and I feel awful." And I said, "Baby, feeling awful is normal. It means you care. It means you're human, but it doesn't define you." And she whispered, "Okay, I'll try to fix it." And I could hear the small tremble in her voice, fighting with determination. We stayed on the line for hours, planning how to approach her friend, how to apologize, how to make amends without making things worse. And I whispered over and over, "Baby, it's okay. Take it slow. We'll fix this together." And she whispered, "Okay, I'll try." And I could hear her small breaths becoming steadier as she repeated the plan out, loud, and I knew she was beginning to trust herself again, even though fear was still there. Like a shadow, by morning she texted me little updates from school every time she made an effort, every small victory she achieved, and I would respond with, "Encouragement, baby. That's amazing. Every little step matters." And she would reply tiny emojis or "okay," and I could feel her confidence growing with every text she whispered. I think my teacher noticed I'm trying harder, and I said, "Baby, that's wonderful. That's exactly what she needs to see." And she whispered, "Yeah, I think she does." And I could hear the pride in her words, a little spark building in her small voice. Then came the afternoon when I felt my chest tighten again. She whispered, "Mom said she wants to talk to you about something." And I froze for a second, my stomach flipping. I said, "Baby, it's okay. Tell me what happened." And she whispered, "It's about the broken vase, the cookie jar, and everything I've done lately." And I said, "Baby, it's okay. We'll face this together." And she whispered, "But I'm scared. I don't know if she'll be mad." And I said, "Baby, honesty is stronger than anger. We'll take it step by step." And she whispered, "Okay." And I could hear the tiny shakiness in her voice fading as she nodded to herself. We made a plan like we always did, step by step, how to explain everything, how to show effort, how to take responsibility, how to be honest and gentle. And I whispered over and over, "Baby, it's okay, take it slow. We'll fix this together." And she whispered, "Okay, I'll try." And I could hear her small breath steadying as she prepared herself for the moment of truth. Later that night, she called again, voice soft but calmer. I whispered, "Hi, baby." And she said hi, and I said, "How are you feeling?" And she whispered, nervous, but ready. And I said, "Baby, that's perfect. That's exactly what I wanted to hear." And she whispered, "Okay, I'll try to talk to her now." And I could hear her resolve strengthening, little by little. She told me later that her mom noticed her nervousness and asked gently what was wrong. And she whispered, "I don't know how to start." And I said, "Baby, just start with the truth." And she whispered, "Okay." And I could hear her small voice, trembling as she explained everything from the first broken vase to the cookie jar to the incidents at school and how she had tried to fix it each time. And I whispered, "Baby, good job. You're being honest and brave." Every word mattered. Her mom's response was calm but firm. She said she was proud of her honesty, but reminded her about consequences, that learning comes with responsibility. And I whispered, "Baby, that's okay. Baby, that's normal. Everyone needs to process things." She whispered, "Yeah, I guess." And I said, "Baby, you did the hardest part. You were honest and you're fixing it every day." And she whispered, "Yeah." I feel a little lighter, and I could hear the tiny relief in her voice. Over the next few days, she sent me texts and photos, showing every effort she made at home, helping with chores, apologizing to her friends and classmates, and I responded with encouragement, "Baby, that's amazing. Every single effort matters." And she would reply tiny emojis, or "okay," and I could hear her confidence growing steadily each day. She whispered, "I think Mom is noticing I'm trying harder." And I said, "Baby, that's wonderful. That's exactly right." And she whispered, "Yeah, I think she does." And I felt the tension loosening from her small shoulders a little. Then came the night when she whispered something that made my heart ache. She said, "I think my friend is still mad." And I said, "Baby, you can't control other people's feelings, but you can control your own actions." And she whispered, "Yeah, but I feel guilty." And I said, "Baby, feeling guilty shows you care. It doesn't define you. It means you're human." And she whispered, "Okay, I'll try to talk to her again." And I said, "Baby, That's exactly right. Honesty and effort together. Fix things, and she whispered thanks. I don't know what I would do without you, and I said, baby, you're stronger than you think, you just need to see it. That night we stayed on the phone until she felt calm, until she whispered, I think I can sleep now, and I said, that's what I wanted. Baby. Close your eyes, rest, and she whispered, love you, and I said love you too. And I knew she was beginning to trust herself again. By the end of part 6, I could see the real transformation. Mistakes no longer terrified her. She still felt guilt and fear, but she had learned how to face it, how to fix it, how to trust herself and others. She was still young and fragile in many ways, but she had a backbone now, a spark of courage that would carry her through the challenges ahead, and I knew that this was only the beginning, that mistakes and fears would come again, but now she had the tools to survive and grow. Stories. Her heart holds. It was late at night when my phone buzzed again, her name flashing across the screen. I felt my chest tighten because late-night calls always meant something heavy, and I answered softly, hello, baby. And she whispered, hi, I don't know what to do. And I said, baby, tell me what's happening. And she whispered, it's about school again. And I said, okay, baby, take a deep breath. We'll figure this out together. She started telling me slowly, each word trembling through the phone. I think my friend told Mom about the fight we had, and I felt my stomach twist. I said, baby, it's okay. We'll face this together every step. And she whispered, but I'm scared. What if she's mad? And I said, baby, honesty is stronger than anger. We'll take it step by step. And she whispered, okay. I could hear the tiny shakiness in her voice fading as she tried to steady herself. That night we planned everything step by step. How to explain to her mom what happened, how to show she was trying to fix it, how to take responsibility, how to be honest and gentle. I whispered, baby, it's okay. Take it slow. We'll fix this together. And she whispered, okay, I'll try. And I could hear the small breath steadying as she prepared for the moment of truth. The next morning, she sent me a text, a photo of herself standing by the kitchen table, her small hands fidgeting with the hem of her shirt. And I whispered, baby, that's perfect. Being present, being honest, that's exactly what makes a difference. And she whispered, yeah, I'm nervous. And I said, baby, it's okay to be nervous. It means you care. It means you're aware. And she whispered, okay, I'll try to speak calmly. She told me later that her mom noticed the nervousness and asked gently, what was wrong? And she whispered, I don't know how to start. And I said, baby, just start with the truth. And she whispered, okay. And I could hear her small voice trembling as she explained everything. The broken vase, the cookie jar, the incidents at school, how she had tried to fix it every time. And I whispered, baby, good job, you're being honest. Every word mattered. Her mom's response was calm but firm. She said she was proud of her honesty, but reminded her about consequences, that learning comes with responsibility. And I whispered, baby, that's okay. Baby, that's normal. Everyone needs to process things. She whispered, yeah, I guess. And I said, baby, you did the hardest part. You were honest, and you're fixing it every day. And she whispered, yeah. I feel a little lighter, and I could hear the relief in her small voice. Over the next few days, she sent me little updates, little photos, showing every effort she made, helping at home, apologizing to her friends, classmates. And I responded, baby, that's amazing. Every effort matters. And she would reply tiny emojis or okay. And I could hear the confidence growing in her words. And I whispered, baby, see how far you've come. And she whispered, yeah, I think Mom noticed. And I said, baby, she already has. Then came the night when she whispered something that made my heart ache. She said, I think my friend is still mad. And I said, baby, you can't control other people's feelings, but you can control your own actions. And she whispered, Yeah, but I feel guilty. And I said, baby, feeling guilty shows you care. It doesn't define you. It means you're human. And she whispered, okay, I'll try to talk to her again. And I said, baby, that's exactly right. Honesty and effort together fix things. And she whispered, thanks. I don't know what I would do without you. And I said, baby, you're stronger than you think. You just need to see it. That night we stayed on the phone until she felt calm, until she whispered, I think I can sleep now. And I said, that's what I wanted, baby. Close your eyes, rest. And she whispered, love you. And I said, love you too. And I could feel the trust between us growing stronger every night. Then came the day that tested everything. The day her mom called me quietly in, the afternoon voice calm but firm. She said she wanted to thank me for helping guide her daughter. She said she noticed the changes, the honesty, the effort, the courage. And I felt a warmth spread in my chest. I whispered, thank you for trusting me with her, and she said, you've done more than I could have imagined. And I whispered, baby, that's because she's amazing. And she whispered, I'm proud of her too. And I could hear the pride in her voice. By the end of part 7, I could see the transformation, completely. She wasn't the same scared, trembling little girl who called me at 2 a.m. She was brave, honest, resilient. And learning how to face fear with courage, mistakes no longer terrified her. She still felt guilt. She still felt fear, but she had learned how to face it, fix it, trust herself and others. She had a backbone now, a spark of courage that would carry her through challenges. And I knew that mistakes would come again, but she now had the tools to survive and grow. And I could see a little light shining in her that would never fade. Stories. Her heart holds it. Was late at night when my phone buzzed, her name flashing across the screen. I felt a familiar tightness in my chest, and I answered softly, hello, baby. And she whispered, hi, I can't sleep. And I said, baby, tell me what's going on. And she whispered, I'm thinking about everything that's happened. And I said, baby, it's okay. Let's talk about it together. She started slowly telling me all the thoughts racing in her mind. The mistakes, the accidents, the fights, the fear of disappointing everyone, and I listened silently, letting her pour everything out. I whispered over and over, baby, it's okay. You're not alone, I'm right here. And she whispered, I feel like everything is my fault. And I said, baby, feeling like it's your fault doesn't mean it is. It means you care and you're aware. And she whispered, okay, I'll try to remember that. Then she whispered something that made my heart ache. She said, I'm scared. Mom will never trust me again, and I said, baby, trust is built little by little, just like we've been doing. And she whispered, but what if I mess up again? And I said, baby, everyone makes mistakes. It's how we handle them that matters. And she whispered, okay. And I could hear the trembling in her voice slowly steadying as she absorbed it. That night, we talked for hours about honesty, responsibility, courage, how to face fear, how to fix mistakes, and I whispered every time, baby, it's okay. Take it slow. We'll fix this together. And she whispered, okay, I'll try. And I could hear the tiny spark of confidence in her voice growing little by little. She whispered, thanks for always being here. And I said, baby, you're doing it all yourself. I'm just guiding you. And she whispered, okay, I'll remember that. The next day, she sent me a photo of herself helping her mom clean up the kitchen, small hands carefully wiping the counter, and I whispered, baby, that's amazing. Every little effort matters. And she whispered, yeah, I think she noticed. And I said, baby, she already has every effort counts. And she whispered, yeah, I guess it does. And I could hear the pride in her words. Building over the next few days, she sent updates of every little victory, apologizing to her friends, classmates, and even her little cousin, and I responded, baby, that's incredible. Every small step matters, and she would reply tiny emojis, or okay, and I could feel her confidence growing steadily. She whispered, "I think Mom is proud of me," and I said, "Baby, she already is," and I could hear the relief in her voice. Then came the night she whispered something soft. I think my friend finally forgave me, and I felt my chest tighten with pride. I said, "Baby, that's wonderful. That's exactly what honesty and effort do," and she whispered, "Yeah, I feel better," and I said, "Baby, that's what matters. Every effort counts, every step forward counts," and she whispered, "Okay, I'll remember that." That night she called me again, whispering quietly, "I think I can sleep now," and I said, "Baby, that's what I wanted. Here, close your eyes, rest," and she whispered, "Love you," and I said, "Love you too." And I could feel her small victories forming into something bigger: trust, courage, resilience. And I knew that the scared little girl who had called me at 2 a.m. was no longer the same. She was brave and honest and learning how to face fear. Then came the moment I had been waiting for. She whispered, "Mom said she's proud of me," and I felt a warmth spread in my chest. I said, "Baby, that's wonderful. That's exactly what you needed to hear." And she whispered, "Yeah," and I said, "Baby, remember, every time you're honest, every time you try to fix things, every time you face your fears, you're building strength and courage." And she whispered, "I feel stronger," and I could hear the spark of confidence fully glowing in her words. By the end of the week, she sent me a final text. Little photo of herself, smiling, small but genuine hands folded in her lap. And she whispered, "Thanks for everything." I said, "Baby, you did it all yourself. I just helped you see you could." And she whispered, "Yeah, I guess I did." And I could feel the pride and joy in her voice growing into something unshakable. Looking back at everything that had happened from that night, at 2 a.m., to now, I could see the journey clearly. The mistakes, the fears, the cries, the trembling hands, the small steps forward, the tiny victories, the trust she built. And I knew that she had changed. She wasn't the same little girl. She was stronger, braver, more honest, more resilient, and ready to face life with courage. And I whispered to myself, "She's ready for anything now." By the final night, she whispered softly, "I feel like I can handle anything now." And I said, "Baby, you can and you will. Every mistake, every fear, every challenge is just another step." And she whispered, "Yeah." And I said, "Baby, never forget, you're loved, you're brave, and you're enough." And she whispered, "I love you." And I said, "I love you too." And with that, the journey that began at 2 a.m. with a trembling phone call ended with courage, honesty, trust, and love. And I knew that she would carry these lessons for the rest of her life. Mistakes would come again. Challenges would come again. Fears would come again. But she now had the tools to face everything and survive and thrive. And I whispered to myself, finally, she's free. Finally, she knows her strength.